When I was a kid, my family used to travel a lot across the country. My parents loved being on the road, and that love of travel stuck with me and my twin brother, Raymond. It's actually what led us both into trucking. Raymond usually drove a Freightliner Cascadia, and I drove a newer Volvo VNL 860, company issued, just a year old at the time, replacing my older 780. We worked for the same company based out of Houston, Texas. One trip in particular still haunts me to this day. I was assigned a long haul, Houston to Los Angeles, then from there, a cross-border run to Vancouver, British Columbia. There was about a week between the LA drop-off and the Vancouver pickup, which meant I had some downtime in LA. My cousin lives out there, so I figured I'd take a little break and asked Raymond to ride along. He was down for it, and our boss didn't mind. The trip to LA was smooth. Open highways, beautiful scenery, and plenty of rest stops to break up the drive. The only real headache was the traffic once we actually hit LA, but we managed. We parked the truck at my cousin's place. He's got a big property, and spent the next few days just hanging out. Beaches, landmarks, even a run to Target to stock up for the next leg of the journey. We left LA later in the evening to avoid traffic. The sun was down, and after a few hours of driving, we got hungry and hit a McDonald's at a rest stop. Raymond was behind the wheel while I munched on a cheeseburger. That's when things took a turn. A sign on the highway said the road ahead was closed. No warning, no detour, just a forced exit onto some backcountry road in the middle of nowhere. We figured we'd reconnect to the highway further ahead, but this road just kept going. Flat, empty fields turned into thick forest, and by the time it hit midnight, we hadn't seen another vehicle for miles. Eventually, Raymond said he had to pee, so we pulled over to the side of this pitch-black road surrounded by trees. There were no lights, no wind, not even the sound of crickets. Just dead silence, and this awful smell in the air, like rotting meat. While Raymond went off into the woods, I walked back to check on the cargo. That smell got stronger, and my curiosity got the best of me. I headed back to the cab to grab a flashlight, but just before I reached the door, I heard something. A whisper. "Hey, Nick?" I turned and saw Raymond walking toward me. He looked uneasy. "Did you see that?" he asked. "See what?" He pointed across the road into the trees. There was a light, in the woods. Before I could respond, he froze, staring behind me. I turned and saw it too. Through the windshield, barely visible in the moonlight, were what looked like bodies, dozens of them, hanging from trees. I grabbed the flashlight and lit up the forest. The beam confirmed what I hoped was just our imagination. There had to be at least a dozen bodies hanging there. Some of them looked fresh. Others were decomposing. One even looked like it had been gutted. I'm not exaggerating when I say it looked like someone had removed their organs. The sight made me gag. But then I made the mistake of turning off the flashlight. And that's when I saw it. Deep in the woods, a faint glow, a flickering, moving light. And it was coming closer. Raymond didn't wait. He grabbed my arm and shoved me into the truck. We slammed the doors, started the engine, and tore out of there. As we sped off, I looked in the side mirror. Figures, 5, maybe 10, were now standing in the road right where we had just been parked. One of them stood out. He, or it, was taller than the others and had something on its head. It looked like a mask, or maybe a deformed skull. I don't know. I didn't want to know. We didn't stop until hours later at a truck stop gas station off the highway. While I pumped fuel, Raymond called the police and our boss to report what we saw. We still had to make the delivery to Vancouver, so we pushed on. No more detours, no more stops, unless it was absolutely necessary. Food, fuel, that's it. Weeks later, we found out we may have stumbled into some kind of cult territory. There were rumors about them. Sacrifices, organ harvesting, ritual killings. They were supposedly active in some of the more remote regions between California and Oregon. None of it was ever on the news. After that trip, I couldn't shake the image of those bodies. A few weeks later, I quit my job and took a smaller local gig near my town. Raymond kept driving, but something in him changed. He still won't talk about that night. This happened to me about 15 years ago when I was 13, and even now, I still get a knot in my stomach thinking about it. I grew up on a cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere, somewhere out in the Great Plains. Our house sat 5 miles down a gravel road, surrounded by open pasture land. The nearest neighbor was 2 miles away. We were used to being isolated. My dad dealt with cattle deliveries all the time. Truckers would bring in shipments and we'd unload them right at the chute. It was routine. That weekend, though, my parents had taken my little sister to Dallas, and I was staying behind to accept a late-night delivery from Nebraska on my own for the first time. I wasn't too worried. I'd done it plenty of times before, just never alone. My dad left me with one piece of advice. Don't tell the driver I was by myself. Midnight came and went, and there was no sign of the truck. Around 1 a.m., I finally saw headlights way off in the distance. But the truck didn't pull up. It just stopped in the middle of the road and sat there. For at least 30 minutes. No movement, no one stepping out. Just headlights in the dark. Eventually, it started creeping down the road and pulled up to the loading chute. I went out to meet the driver. Right away, something felt off. This guy looked completely disheveled, clothes covered in dirt and stains, like he'd been living in them for days. He started mumbling about being late, something about a flat tire, then animals on the road, then something about fuel. None of it made much sense. Then he asked how old I was. I gave him a vague answer, something like, old enough to help out, and he just stared at me for a second. Then he launched into this weird, rambling story about his younger years, saying he used to date a girl he later found out was related to him, and apparently he kept seeing her anyway. It was seriously disturbing. The way he talked. Something was just wrong. It felt less like small talk and more like he was trying to get a reaction out of me. I didn't say much, just told him we should start unloading the cattle and that my mom was waiting inside. He grumbled something under his breath, then climbed up to release the first group of animals. I stayed back, counting them as they came off the trailer. That's when things got weirder. He opened the second group, then went inside the trailer to mess with one of the inner gates. A minute later, he yelled out to me, saying he needed help inside. I hesitated. That was something I'd never been asked to do before. No one ever needs help inside those trailers, especially not from a kid. I told him I needed to stay outside to count. He kept insisting. I kept saying no. It was clear he was trying to get me into that enclosed space, and I wasn't having it. After a few more back and forths, he finally gave up and opened the gate. He repeated this same weird tactic with the next 2 compartments, pretending to need help, getting frustrated when I wouldn't step inside. But each time, I just said no. By the time the last group of cattle was off, his entire demeanor had changed. He went from being overly chatty to angry and short-tempered. Then, as if to test me one more time, he told me to climb into his truck cab and grab the delivery slip from his glove box. I wasn't about to turn my back on this guy or get into another confined space with him. I told him to get it himself. He stood there for a second, looking at me, then finally climbed in, grabbed the slip, and handed it to me. I signed it and told him we were done. As soon as he left, I sprinted back to the house. From the window, I watched his truck sit out there in the dark for over an hour before he finally drove off. I didn't sleep until he was gone. That delivery should have taken 20 minutes tops. Instead, it turned into one of the most disturbing experiences of my life. I don't know what would have happened if I'd stepped into that trailer. I'm glad I never found out. About 5 years ago, my now husband and I were making a long road trip from the East Coast to the West Coast. It wasn't our first time doing the drive. This time we were just heading back to pick up the last of our stuff and grab our 2 dogs. By that point, we were just trying to get the trip over with, so we only stopped for quick bathroom or food breaks. I honestly don't remember which state we were in when this happened. After that many cross-country trips, all the rest stops start to blur together. It was probably around 3 or 4 in the morning when we pulled into a rest area. The lot was nearly empty, except for 1 car and a couple of semis parked in the trucker section. We figured we'd switch drivers, stretch our legs, and let the dogs out. My husband had been behind the wheel, so I told him I'd run to the restroom first while he stayed with the car and smoked a cigarette. The dog area was right near where we parked, but the restrooms were farther off, over a small hill. From the lot, you couldn't even see them. Even though I didn't feel unsafe, it was pitch black out and quiet, so my husband decided to walk most of the way with me just to be safe. After I was done, I headed back to let the dogs out while he took his turn using the restroom. Now, I'm not exactly an intimidating person. I'm about 5'2", not very heavy, but I've got 2 big German Shepherd mixes who are extremely protective. On top of that, I grew up learning self-defense and know how to handle myself if I need to. So even though it was dark and we were kind of isolated from the main rest stop lights, I wasn't nervous. As the dogs were sniffing around doing their business, I noticed one of the semis that had been parked on the far end start up and begin slowly moving. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I just assumed the driver was getting back on the highway. I picked up after the dogs and started walking toward the trash can when I was suddenly blinded by high beams. The semi had pulled up as close as it could to the dividing line between the truck side and the car side, and now the brights were aimed directly at me. At first, I was just annoyed. I tossed the bags, squinted into the lights for a second, then turned back toward the car. But as I was walking, the truck started flashing its lights, again and again, like he was trying to get my attention. He crept his truck forward slowly, still flashing the brights, and my irritation turned into something else: unease. By now, my dogs had picked up on my change in mood. They stopped sniffing around and locked in on the truck, ears up, staring hard. I got close to our car, and the driver stopped again, still flashing the lights. I wasn't scared yet, just confused and pissed. I stood there, just glaring back at him, waiting for him to knock it off. Eventually, the flashing stopped. I started pulling out my keys, ready to get into the car. That's when both of my dogs froze. Their hackles went up. They started growling. And then I heard a door creak open. I turned around and saw that the semi's driver's side door was now open, and a boot was starting to step out. This guy was actually about to get out of his truck. I was standing there, completely still, thinking how stupid this guy must be to approach someone with 2 large dogs, when suddenly, my husband came walking back from the restrooms. He walked straight up to me, put his arm around me, and without hesitation, flipped the guy off. The trucker paused, then slowly pulled his foot back into the cab, shut the door, and within seconds, took off out of the rest area. Once we were back on the road, I told my husband about the lights flashing, and that's when he explained something I'd never heard before. Apparently, some truckers flash their lights at women at rest stops as a way to signal for, well, hookups. I was disgusted. I wasn't dressed suggestively. I was wearing layers. It was cold. I was driving a newer car, walking 2 big dogs, and obviously wasn't out there looking to talk to strangers. I don't think I was ever really scared, but the whole thing definitely crossed into creepy territory. The guy clearly thought I was alone, and something about his approach felt off. Not just flirty or weird, but aggressive, like he expected me to respond. I've got creepier stories from our travels, but this one always sticks in my mind because of how casually it happened. Like it was just something that guy did all the time. This happened to me a couple of summers ago when I had just turned 18. I was fresh out of high school, halfway through my first year of college, living away from home for the first time. I'd grown up pretty sheltered, so being on my own was still a new experience. I'm also a woman, which will matter as this goes on. It was mid-May, and I was driving home from my brother's wedding. My school was a few states away, and I had a long drive ahead of me. I was about an hour out from my college town, cruising along the interstate somewhere in Tennessee. I think it was I-40. Traffic was heavy, but nothing unusual. It was early afternoon, bright and sunny, when I noticed something weird in my mirror. There was a semi-truck a little ways behind me in the right lane. Nothing strange about that, until I saw his headlights flashing. At first, I figured he wanted to merge or pass, so I sped up a little and switched lanes to give him space. But he didn't pass. In fact, he stayed right behind me, not letting any other cars get between us. And then he flashed his lights again. I glanced up at him. He waved. Then he honked. That's when I started to get a little uneasy. Still, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was trying to warn me about something wrong with my car. I had gotten a tire patch the week before, and I started panicking that maybe the patch had come loose and my tire was going flat. The next exit was coming up, and I decided to pull off just to be safe. There was a gas station right off the ramp, and I figured I could check the car there. I wasn't expecting the truck to follow me, but it did. He pulled into the same parking lot and parked in the designated truck zone. That was when I knew something wasn't right. I got out and quickly walked around my car. Tires were fine. No smoke, no noise. Nothing seemed wrong. But he was already climbing down from the cab of his truck and heading in my direction. I didn't want to take any chances, so I stayed by my car with my phone in hand, already dialed to 911, just waiting for me to press call. I stood half behind my open driver's side door, the gas hose between us like a makeshift barrier. He stopped a few feet away from the back of my car. He looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s, maybe 170 pounds. I was 18, barely 125, and not exactly in fighting shape. The first thing he said to me was, "Well, ain't you a pretty little thing?" I felt my stomach drop. Every part of my brain was screaming. I smiled tightly and said thanks, trying not to show how freaked out I was. He offered to pay for my gas. I declined. I didn't want him to think I owed him anything. Then came the questions. Where was I from? Where was I headed? Was I in college? And that was the moment some inner instinct took over and just said, lie, about everything. So I did. Gave him a fake hometown, made up a fake school, said I was just stopping for gas on a short trip to visit family nearby. He didn't push, but he didn't walk away either. I don't know if I was just lucky, or if the 911 screen still pulled up on my phone gave him second thoughts. But as soon as the gas pump clicked off, I thanked him again, got in my car, and drove off as fast as I could without drawing attention. He didn't follow me back onto the highway. I never saw his truck again. I still have no idea what his actual intentions were. Maybe he was just a creepy guy trying to flirt in the worst way possible. Or maybe it could have been something a lot darker if I hadn't trusted my gut. I never reported it, and that's one of my biggest regrets. I just wanted to forget it. But since then, I haven't looked at truck drivers the same way. A few months ago, I was heading back to college after visiting my parents for the weekend. It's about a 2-hour drive, and I was alone in my dad's old pickup truck. Just me, some music, and a mostly empty highway. I'm a 21-year-old woman, barely 5'3", not exactly intimidating. I was in the far left lane of a 3-lane highway, just vibing out to the radio, singing along and kind of dancing in my seat like an idiot, just enjoying the drive. That was when I noticed a semi-truck creeping up in the far right lane, going exactly my speed. I stopped dancing, kind of embarrassed that someone saw me acting like a dork. I tried speeding up a little to get ahead of him and out of view, but to my surprise, he sped up too. I looked over to see who it was. The driver, middle-aged, balding, wearing a faded blue t-shirt, was smiling, waving at me. Friendly at first. I gave a small awkward wave back, thinking that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. He merged into the center lane, now just one lane away, and kept waving, flashing this overly cheerful smile. It felt off. I tried speeding up again. He matched me. I slowed down. So did he. No matter what I did, he wouldn't let me get away. If someone came up in his lane, he'd wait until the last possible second, swerve around them, then block me from merging away. He had experience with driving like this. I didn't. He was using the other cars to trap me. For 5 straight miles, I couldn't shake him. And during all of it, he was still smiling, still waving. At one point, he even started holding up one finger, like a number 1 gesture. I have no idea what that was supposed to mean, but the look in his eyes while he did it made my skin crawl. At that point, I was officially scared. I called 911. I gave the dispatcher a full description of the truck, white trailer, black cab, Pennsylvania license plate, and told them everything. She advised me to pull over onto the shoulder, but the left shoulder was narrow, and I didn't feel safe stopping there. Luckily, the driver got briefly stuck behind someone in the middle lane, and I took the chance to drop speed fast, switch over 2 lanes, and shoot forward into the far right lane. He tried to catch up, but this time I stayed ahead. The dispatcher told me to exit at the next service plaza, a few miles ahead. She said he probably wouldn't follow me once I left the highway. She was wrong. With no turn signal or brake lights, he somehow knew I was taking that exit. As I started pulling off, he braked hard and merged behind me, timing it perfectly, and followed me into the service plaza. My heart was pounding. I told the dispatcher what was happening, and she transferred me to another operator, who reassured me that officers were on their way. Now this service plaza was designed so that semi-trucks had to take a separate road that looped around behind the building. Smaller vehicles like mine parked out front. I pulled into a spot by the main entrance and kept my eyes on the truck as he took the other lane. He stared at me the entire way around. I didn't want to sit there like a sitting duck, so I drove over to a gas station next to the plaza that overlooked the truck lot. I figured he wouldn't think to look there, and I could wait for the police. I was still on the phone with dispatch, trying to stay calm. And that's when I saw him. He was out of the truck now, walking toward the service plaza. But instead of going inside, he stopped and ducked behind a large concrete pillar where he just stood there, watching my truck. I told the dispatcher he was hiding. I told her I was scared and that I didn't feel safe staying put. She told me again, "Hold tight. Officers are almost there." Then he came out from behind the pillar and started walking directly toward my truck. I put it in drive just in case. I kept my eyes on the mirrors. He walked a slow, deliberate circle around my vehicle, smiling the entire time. It wasn't a friendly smile anymore. It was dark, calculating, like he was looking for a way in. That was it. I snapped. I floored the gas pedal and sped out of the lot, telling the dispatcher I wasn't waiting anymore. She apologized and said officers would still check the area and speak with the man if they found him, but that I needed to focus on getting home safely. I never found out if they caught up with him. I never saw him again after that. But the worst part was the feeling that none of it would have happened if I hadn't been alone. If I'd had a guy in the passenger seat, I bet he would have just kept driving. I grew up in a small town. Everyone knew everyone, even far from where I lived. So I figured, why not? I grew up here. I know the area. It felt safe. I was on video call with my boyfriend and told him what I was doing. He stayed on the line with me. I didn't bring anything. No taser, no pepper spray, not even the alarm my dad always told me to carry. And yeah, I snuck out. I didn't want my dad to know I was out hunting for weed. It was stupid, but that's where my head was at. So I'm walking. It's pitch black. The streets between my neighborhood and the drop are barely lit. I have to cross railroad tracks, and the only light is from a warehouse in the distance and a few streetlights near the main road. As I get closer to the main road, I see a semi-truck parked on the side. That's not weird. I've seen trucks parked there since I was a kid. But then I hear, "Hola! Hey!" I look over and see a man leaning out of the semi. Hispanic guy, red long sleeve. Looked like almost any other man in town. But his smile, I don't know. It didn't feel right. There was something off. Something behind it. I waved, just being polite. He started speaking to me in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. Yeah, I know. I grew up in a Hispanic town, but my parents never taught me. So I just kind of called back, "No hablo español," and kept walking. My boyfriend asked me who it was, and I told him, just some random semi-driver. Nothing to worry about. I kept walking. Spent maybe 40 minutes searching, trying to find the stash. Never did. My phone was dying, and my boyfriend told me it was time to head home. I agreed and started heading back. Then I got this feeling. A bad one. I looked down the dark street leading back toward the tracks, and something told me, don't go that way. Just don't. So I turned and walked toward the other end of the street, toward the warehouse. It was brighter over there, and the light made me feel a little safer. I walked past some empty trailers sitting in the shadows near the building, and then I heard it. "Hey." I spun around, and there he was, the same truck driver, the same creepy smile. He stepped out from behind one of the trailers, like he'd been waiting. He had one hand jammed in his pocket and was angling his body like he was hiding something. He motioned with his free hand. "Come here." I didn't move. I told my boyfriend, "Wake up your dad. Come get me. Now." I started backing away. My heart was slamming. I tried to think, tried to stay calm. The second he realized I was on the phone, his smile dropped. He looked pissed. Then he started ducking behind the trailers again, like he didn't want to be seen. I turned and ran. Told my boyfriend again, "Come get me. Please. Tell your dad. Hurry." I didn't want to call my dad. I was still terrified of getting caught sneaking out. Even with this guy possibly trying to kidnap me, that fear still had a hold on me. That's how twisted the moment was. I ran across the main road to a little mini-mart and ducked behind an ice machine out front. I told my boyfriend I had to hang up, and I called a friend instead. By some miracle, he was out with his girlfriend and told me he'd be there right away. While I waited, I stayed hidden behind the ice machine and peeked out just enough to see his semi-drive slowly past. I saw him scanning the parking lot, looking for me. He stopped for a second, shook his head like he was disappointed, and then drove off. But even with him gone, I didn't feel safe until I saw my friend pull up. The second I got in his car, I broke down crying. His girlfriend held my hand and helped calm me down. They took me home. My boyfriend gave me a small lecture, but honestly, I'll take that any day over what could have happened. That night shattered any illusion I had about being safe because of how I looked. I'd always assumed no one would target me because I wasn't thin, I wasn't pretty, I was invisible. But predators don't care. They don't care how confident you are or what you think makes you safe. They see opportunity and they take it. I was lucky, way too lucky.